Welcome to the worst of the best podcast. You wanted the best. Well, they didn't freaking make it! So here's what you get. From Canada, Ryan and
Jason. Welcome to another episode of the Worst of the Best podcast. I'm your host, Ryan, and with me again, of course, is Jason. Jason, welcome back to the show. I guess I'm saying that because I just did a kind of a bonus episode or a guest appearance episode with Andy there. We did a music episode, and that was a really good episode. I hope people will check that out, even if you're not familiar with the band that we covered. I think if you like rock and roll, you might like that coverage. I don't know if you listened to it yet, Jay, or...
I hadn't. I noticed that you downloaded, but I am familiar with the band.
Are you really?
Yeah. I've worked a couple of their shows.
Oh, cool. Okay, that's funny because that was part of the gist of that show. When you listened to it was I had no idea they existed. And the guest co-host, Andy, I just said to him, hey, let's do a music episode. What's one of your favorite bands? And he told me Clutch. I'm like, who? And then I said, what's your favorite album? And that's what we covered. So I was... legitimately impressed with the album, and I think
Clutch opened up for Guns N' Roses a few years, like one of their, when not with Slash and stuff, but during one of the Chinese Democracy runs, Clutch, I believe, was one of the opening acts. I think they opened up for, I want to say Metallica maybe once as well.
I can see it. It's very possible. Yeah. So yeah, check that out if you haven't already. Again, if you like rock and roll or just album discussions, that's a good episode to get behind. We thank Andy for that. Okay. So, Jason, today's episode is about assassination attempts on world or political leaders. If you're a world leader throughout the generations of time, it goes without saying, there have been attempts on many people's lives throughout the world, from all nations around the world through all time, kings, queens, emperors, leaders, political leaders, war leaders, chiefs of, tribes and stuff. Like, people get knocked out. Somebody doesn't like what you have to say and you're the leader, and there will be an attempt at your life. This is a reality in the world we live in even today. So what Jason and I are going to do today is we've gathered some of the more familiar names and the more recent ones. So again, these were assassination attempts, meaning they did not succeed. I should say none of the targets were killed, but there was some collateral damage to some of the attempts. We'll talk about those. But these are interesting news stories in the sense this is history, and that's kind of how I look at it at the same time. A lot of these people aren't around with us anymore as it is. Time ultimately got some of these people, but some of them are still alive today. And of course, we will discuss the history of these attempts and what it meant to the public, what it meant to the person. We're going to pick what we think is the worst attempt, meaning some were pretty legit, some were pretty thought out, staked out. We'll get into those details. And some were not as handled as well as others, and thus the attempts failed because of that. So I think we're going to go with maybe had the person planned better. So what was the worst blunder? Had they planned it a little bit better, they might have
the worst attempt.
The worst attempt, yeah, sure. All right, well, I'll start with the first one, Jay. This is President Theodore Roosevelt. So on October 14th of 1912, Theodore Roosevelt survived an assassination attempt while campaigning for the presidency as the candidate of the Progressive Party. The incident took place outside the Gilpatrick Hotel in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The assailant was John Schrank, a former saloon keeper from New York. He shot Roosevelt in the chest with a .38 caliber. So the bullet penetrated Roosevelt's steel eyeglass case and a 50-page folded copy of his speech, that's some speech, which he was carrying in his jacket before lodging in his chest muscle. So the bullet did get through, and the bullet penetrated the glass case, the papers, and still lodged in his chest muscle. Do you remember this attempt?
It's funny. I had not known, just because of recent events. It kind of popped up historically, on Google feed, whatever. And I was like, I had no idea he had an attempt on his life. Never heard of it.
Well, despite being shot, Jay, Roosevelt insisted on delivering his scheduled speech at the auditorium. He spoke for 84 minutes, which probably explains his 50 pages, with the bullet still in his chest. Famously beginning his speech by saying, quote, "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether you fully understand that I have just been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose. His calm and resilient response to the shooting helped cement his rugged, tough image. After the speech, Roosevelt was taken to a hospital where doctors determined that it was safer to leave the bullet in its place rather than remove it, and he carried that bullet inside his body till he died.
Wow. Shows you a couple things. How far we've come medically.
Yeah, sure.
There's no way that a bullet in a chest would... If it was in the chest muscle or something, today they'd figure out a way to get it out. Today?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, this is 1912, so yeah.
That's crazy.
So the assailant, John Schrank, he was found not guilty, Jason, even back then by reason of insanity, and he was committed to a mental institution for the rest of his life. He died in 1943.
I wonder how old John Schrank was.
I didn't get the age on the assailant. He died in 43, so he died 30 years later. So
25 to 35?
Sure, something like that. So that's it for Theodore Roosevelt, Jay, but you actually have the next one, another Roosevelt.
Okay.
Well, they're related they're like fifth cousins or something like that. So they're not that related.
Franklin D. Roosevelt. On February 15th, 1933, President-elect Franklin D. Roosevelt narrowly escaped an assassination attempt in Miami, Florida. The assailant, Giuseppe Zangara, was an Italian immigrant who had moved to the United States in 1923 and had become a naturalized citizen in 1929. Roosevelt was delivering an impromptu speech from the back of an open car in Bayfront Park when Zangara, armed with a .32 caliber revolver, fired 5 shots. Due to his short stature, Zangara had to stand on a wobbly metal folding chair to get a clear shot, which ultimately affected his aim. As he fired, a bystander named Lillian Cross grabbed his arm, causing him to miss Roosevelt, but hit 5 other people, including Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak, who later died from his injuries.
Here's where we have, a bystander being killed by an assassination attempt where the target of the assassination attempt was not killed. However, this happens a couple times throughout this list. A bystander, this is the mayor, the Chicago mayor, Jay, got hit.
Yeah. Interesting that Chicago mayor was in Miami, Florida.
Must have been some sort of event, some sort of political event, probably the same party, who knows, like supporting each other, who knows.
I'm guessing Lillian Cross, female, brave.
That's awesome. Yeah, see, that's what I mean. This is pretty cool. Like, buddy's firing off 5 shots, which you can do very quickly, and this individual, Lillian, grabs the arm and says, hey, man, come on.
Roosevelt remained calm during the chaos and insisted on taking the wounded Cermak to the hospital in his car, where he comforted him throughout the ride. This act of bravery and compassion left a significant impression on the public. Cermak reportedly told Roosevelt, "I'm glad it was me, not you." Yeah, it could also have been done, in a kind of a self-deprecating, humorous way. I'm glad it was me, and not you. Know what I mean? You don't try to keep calm by creating a little bit of humor, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. That's cool. So Roosevelt's in the back of the car with the Chicago mayor comforting him, saying, hey, man, hang in there. We're getting you to the hospital. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Zangara expressed a deep-seated hatred for political leaders and wealthy individuals, stating during his confession, "I kill kings and presidents first and next, all capitalists." He was quickly tried and sentenced to 80 years in prison for attempted murder. However, after Cermak's death, Zangara's charge was upgraded to first-degree murder, and he was executed in an electric chair on March 20th, 1933, just over a month after the shooting.
Yeah, they didn't waste any time.
Pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
While Zangara claimed to have acted alone, conspiracy theories have suggested that he may have been hired by the Chicago outfit to kill Cermak, who had allegedly ordered an assassination attempt on the mob boss Frank Nitti.
So the conspiracy theory is that Roosevelt was never the target, that the target was the Chicago mayor. That is an interesting conspiracy theory. Like we said before about these theories, that they don't come out of nothing in the sense like, hey, this Chicago mayor, because this is back in the 30s, right? During Prohibition era. So the Chicago mayor wanted a assassination attempt on the mob boss at the time, Frank Nitti. So it's pretty interesting how the Chicago mayor, Cermak, at the time was involved, of course, with the Prohibition era and the gangsters at the time. So they hired this other guy to say, can you kill the Chicago mayor for us? So that's an interesting theory.
Now, the only thing I have about that is you would think it'd be easier to have done that in Chicago.
That's why I don't think it holds much weight. You're right, because it would just be easier just to kill the mayor than the president. And then Zangara's own words were, I kill kings first. Presidents
exactly.
first.
The assassination attempt on Roosevelt occurred during a critical period in American history just before his inauguration as the 32nd president. The public's reaction to Roosevelt's calm and decisive response to the crisis likely bolstered his support as he prepared to implement the New Deal to combat the Great Depression. Roosevelt went on to serve 4 terms as president, leading the country through the Great Depression and World War II.
Dude, that's amazing. 4 terms. So this guy was, I guess, I don't know much about history. Of course, I know the name. I didn't realize he was president that long. I've heard the name, of course, that he was the president during World War II, but he must have been a very loved president, Jay.
Yeah. So what I find interesting in all of this is, sometimes the way that the politics is talked about today, it's like a 2-term and you're out. And if you give any indication that you would run longer than your 2 terms, you're like a dictator or you want to be a king. So I thought that was always from the beginning. But it's interesting to see, clearly, it was something that they had done in the past. And it's not that far out of the reach of thinking that a president could be a president more than they are now. It's not that far in the past where they actually were allowed to run for more than 1 term.
I think it's the way it is in Canada. That's why we've had our prime minister longer than 8 years. So,
yeah.
Of course, you've heard the name Gerald Ford, Jason?
Yes.
So there wasn't any real attempts on any presidents. Well, there was one attempt, but it worked. JFK, of course. But as far as attempts go that didn't work, we go up to 1975 with Gerald Ford. He was the 38th president of the United States. He survived 2 assassination attempts within a span of just 17 days in September of 75. So here's the first attempt, Jay. It took place in Sacramento, California on September 5th at the Capitol Park. And the perpetrator at the time was Lynette. Yeah, female shooter. Her name was Lynette Squeaky Fromm, and she was a member of the Manson family cult. And she attempted to assassinate President Ford as he walked through Capitol Park to meet Governor Jerry Brown. Fromm, standing a little more than an arm's length from Ford, pointed a Colt M1911 pistol at him. Arm's length, folks. However, the gun did not fire because it lacked a chambered round. It's a revolver, right? So when she clicked, let's say it holds 6 bullets. It wasn't fully loaded, so she clicked on an empty chamber.
Okay.
That's how close Ford was getting. He would have been shot arm's length. You're getting hit. Now, maybe he wouldn't have died, but he would have been hit for sure. However, the gun did not fire because it lacked a chambered round. Secret Service agent Larry Boondorf quickly subdued Fromm and wrestled the gun from her hand. Fromm's motive was rooted in her environmental activism, particularly her concerns about pollution affecting California's redwood trees. She was sentenced to life in prison for the assassination attempt, however, was released on parole in 2009.
So this happened in 75, and she got out of jail in 2009.
34 years later.
Wow, just because she was upset about the environment. Like, what a...
Yeah, I know. It's like, I love green trees and blue oceans. I'm not going to jail for 34 years for it, though. You know what I mean? I'm not going. I'd rather live in a polluted city than a jail cell.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, it's delusional.
And you can do more good.
Yes,
you do more good outside a jail cell. You work towards bettering your community and stuff without having to, kill someone.
Yeah. Do you think killing the president is going to change the environmental impact on the world? It's delusional.
So, Jason, you've got attempt number 2 on Gerald Ford's life in the same month. Another female.
So, 2 things. I did not know Gerald Ford had an attempt on his life. Did you? Yeah, this is interesting. Also, are either one of these been filmed? I'd like to see what that looked like. How close at least that first one. Let's see what the second one looks like.
You mean like
how close was she to him? Yeah, like, is there a video of, there's video footages of, JFK, there's video footage of Ronald Reagan, but is there any video of that first attempt? Because that'd be interesting to see how close she was to him physically. Now, the second attempt on his life was in San Francisco, California. 17 days after the first attempt, Sarah Jane Moore tried to assassinate Ford as he left the St. Francis Hotel after addressing the World Affairs Council. Moore fired 2 shots at Ford from a distance of about 40 feet. The first shot nearly missed Ford, passing over his head. A bystander, Oliver Sipple, intervened by grabbing Moore's arm, causing her second shot to miss Ford, but injured a taxi driver named John Ludwig in the groin.
Oof.
Moore had been evaluated with the Secret Service earlier that year, but was deemed not a threat.
She was on the radar or somebody dangerous to the president or to the government. So interesting that she was screened or talked to, or I don't know how those questions are asked. Like, hey, what's your deal? It's almost like you are somebody of interest, but you haven't really done anything yet, but we got our eye on you.
Yeah, I don't know how, especially back then, because they don't have the internet. You're not making messages. You're not creating a tweet or
probably pamphlets.
Maybe, yeah. Deemed not a threat, but she was arrested, pleaded guilty to attempted assassination, sentenced to life in prison. Moore was released on parole in 2007. So she got out of jail 2 years earlier than the first person.
Yeah, that is weird, eh?
Maybe it's because she pled guilty. Did the first person, Lynette, plead guilty? Like, what's the difference?
It's odd because she actually hit somebody with a bullet too. So she actually had a violent outcome. Nobody died. Maybe good behavior.
Yeah, you're right.
Different prisons, different parole boards, right?
You think you look at one versus the other. Following the attempts, President Ford began wearing a bulletproof trench coat for public appearances. Despite these close calls, he continued his presidency until January 1977. Ford ran for election in 1976, but lost to Jimmy Carter.
You remember that guy, Jay, who grabbed Sarah Jane's arm to stop the shooting? Oliver Sipple? He was initially hailed as a hero, obviously, but there was some media attention that later revealed that he was a homosexual, and this led to personal and familial estrangement. And Oliver Sipple later reconciled with his family, but lived a troubled life until his death in 1989. Poor guy. He stops the president from being assassinated, and back in the 1970s when being gay was kind of like, oh, let's talk. Like, it actually upset. He got outed by the media that he was a gay man who saved the president.
Yeah, very unfortunate, obviously, but it's also such a weird fixation. That's a topic of conversation versus the fact that he was a hero.
Yeah, it's an odd thing to bring up.
Why are they trying to discredit? Why are they trying to discredit what he did by bringing up homosexuality? Is that a political strategy to try and downplay?
Yeah, it's odd. I mean, this was the 1970s.
I don't understand the need to bring it up.
I don't know either, but they did. They had to.
Some type of weird political.
I'd have to read the news articles how they portrayed it. All right, so I've got a video here, a recent video, Jay, that talks about this event.
We're bringing you a history lesson from Ann Arbor at the Gerald R. Ford Library. Ford, a Michigan native, survived 2 assassination attempts. The kicker is that they happened within 17 days of each other.
We'll start on September 5th, 1975. This photo taken just after the attempt. Gerald Ford was in Sacramento to meet with then Governor Jerry Brown. He was walking from his hotel room to meet the governor when Secret Service stopped a woman in a red dress who pulled a gun on him after he stopped to greet a crowd.
So the assassin was tried and convicted, and her name was Lynette Squeaky Fromm, and she was a member of the Charles Manson family.
Supervisory curator of the Gerald R. Ford Library and Museum, Dr. Morel Lukey, says the museum in Grand Rapids is home to the gun Fromm used in the attempt, as you can see here from this high-definition photo.
The second assassination attempt happened on September 22nd, 1975, so just 17 days later. He was out in California again, this time to speak at an annual convention for the AFL-CIO.
The AFL-CIO is the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations, a national trade union center.
The assassin, Sarah Jane Moore, came up to him as he was exiting his hotel and getting ready to get into the limousine. And at that time, she fired a shot. It hit about 5 inches away from him. It hit the door of the hotel. And just as she was getting ready to fire a second shot, a bystander, Oliver Sipple, was able to grab her hand and move it. So instead of hitting Ford, it hit a bystander, and the bystander made a full recovery.
This photo from the moment of Ford reacting to the sound of gunfire. Following both attempts, a bulletproof trench coat was given to President Ford the following month in October of 1975.
And Ford talked about how, he understood that it was really important to wear this vest and he felt really obligated to do so, but he disliked wearing it because it was very hot and heavy. It weighed over 6 pounds.
Like the handgun we previously showed you, the Kevlar trench coat is found on display at the museum, bringing us 2 artifacts surrounding the attempted assassination of the only president hailing from Michigan in our country's history.
Well, he's the only one from Michigan. There you go. I mean, there's only so many presidents, but so many states, but still interesting. Okay. Check out our YouTube channel if you haven't, because you can see some of the pictures there that were shown of the weapon and the trench coat.
That handgun is much bigger than I was envisioning.
Sure, yeah. Oh, he's lucky. Good. Thank you, Oliver. Now we're getting to the age and stage of our life, Jay. I mean, obviously, I was born in 75. You were born in 73. But now the Ronald Reagan, this is a president you and I have memory as of. We actually have memories of him being president. Like,
I have a memory of this happening.
Yeah. So I was young. I was 6 at the time. You were 8 at the time. However, I've seen the news footage, and we'll actually show it on our channel, and you'll hear it on our audio of this attempt. But of course, this was the assassination attempt of President Ronald Reagan. It occurred March 30th of 81. Just 69 days into his first term. The incident took place outside the Washington Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C. after Reagan had delivered a speech to the National Conference of Building and Construction Trades Department. This is interesting. John Hinckley Jr., he's a 25-year-old at the time with a history of mental illness. He carried out the attack. Hinckley, as we all know, was obsessed with actress Jodie Foster and believed that assassinating the president would impress her. Now, I love Jodie Foster. She's one of my favorite actresses. I loved her growing up as a teenager. I had a crush on her despite her proclivity not to like people like me. But I love her as an actress. I think she's a fantastic person, intelligent, highly smart, incredible actress. Okay. So he was just as obsessed, but I wouldn't shoot Reagan for her. He did at the age of 25. The weapon he used, Jay, was a Rome RG TAC 14 22 caliber revolver loaded with 6. Now check this out. I did not know this. 6 Devastator brand cartridges, which contained small explosive charges designed to explode on impact. He was shooting to kill, man. This guy was shooting to kill. This is the breakdown of the events. So the shooting took place as Reagan exited the hotel at approximately 2:27 p.m. Hinckley fired 6 shots in 1.7 seconds.
Wow.
So he was fast on the trigger. The first bullet struck White House Press Secretary James Brady in the head. The second bullet hit D.C. police officer Thomas Delahanty in the neck. The third bullet missed and hit a building window. The fourth bullet hit Secret Service agent Tim McCarthy in the stomach. The fifth bullet hit the limousine window. The sixth bullet ricocheted off the limousine and struck Reagan under his left arm, grazing a rib, puncturing a lung, and stopping less than an inch from his heart. The sixth and final bullet. Isn't that incredible, Jay? So Hinckley, he did some damage on those 6 shots.
Obviously, Reagan recovered. I don't know about Tim McCarthy. Obviously recovered, right? Because no one died. James Brady had brain injuries, though. He suffered the rest of his life.
Okay, so nobody died from that.
That's the name that I remember of all of these people's names. I remember his name. He suffered.
That's right. He came up with the James Brady was severely injured and became a prominent advocate for gun control. That's probably why you remember him. He was the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, also known as the Brady Bill, was named in his honor, and it was passed in 1993. Of note is the quick response of the Secret Service. Unlike maybe some recent events, Jason, the Secret Service that surrounded Reagan were incredible. They did an incredible job. Have you seen that video?
Yeah, I love it.
The quick reaction of his team is pretty impressive. How fast they worked. Let's just show that.
March 30th, 1981. John Hinckley was a 25-year-old with romantic delusions, convinced that actress Jodie Foster would be impressed if he killed the president. Outside the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C., Hinckley caught up with his target.
And I don't think there was a better demonstration of how that training worked than the assassination attempt against President Reagan. Jerry Parr and Ray Shattuck, as soon as that first shot goes off, they grab the president and they throw him into the car.
Agent Tim McCarthy shielded Reagan with his body, taking a bullet in the process. Within moments, the limo sped away from a scene of chaos. Hinckley was buried under a mountain of Secret Service agents. Agent McCarthy, Press Secretary James Brady, and D.C. policeman Thomas Delahanty lay on the sidewalk, severely injured. All three survived, but Brady had permanent brain damage.
The old saying that, Secret Service agent will take a bullet for the president. If you look at the Reagan assassination, Tim McCarthy did do that, but he was trained to do that as well. And his heroic actions demonstrate that.
Although the agents around the president reacted heroically, many mistakes had been made.
Interesting how this was filmed when this was filmed. This is not a recent video. It's like 12 years ago, 13 years ago. This was uploaded to YouTube. So just keep that in mind with some of the recent events, how they're even kind of saying there were some mistakes made even back then. So
the Secret Service relies on a perimeter system of protection. The outer is a preliminary check by local police. The middle has Secret Service agents searching for weapons.
And then there's the inner perimeter, and that's the final defense. It's the agents around the president.
Hinckley had penetrated 2 of the perimeters and fired at least 5 shots at point-blank range. The Secret Service had been trying for years to get metal detectors to screen for weapons. They got authorization days later. The perimeters were tightened, and the idea of an open arrival and departure ended after the attempt against President Reagan.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So,
dude, that guy that got the shot in the abdomen, he went full out. He was as broad as he could be in front of the president.
Yeah.
Wow. Big mistakes were made, but you know what? They just didn't have the same level. You would never see a president walk in and out of a building. I mean, now you've seen their motorcades and stuff. I mean, it's literally a traveling army.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's just so different. I mean, the response from the people that were there didn't seem to be really any mistakes with the type of coverage that Reagan had that I can really see. I just don't think that they really had the level, like they say after that attempt, what I've grown up watching, the level and layers of people is so much thicker that I don't recall it being as thin as like the Gerald Ford one. I was surprised. He's just like, I don't know. They didn't have the amount of people that they do now.
I got a treat for you here, Jay. Show you before I treat you and the audience with this video. Let's tie up here. So Reagan almost died for real. He lost more than half of his blood volume.
Wow.
That ricochet from the limousine, it hit him, and he was bleeding out. But he was stabilized, and he eventually recovered. Reagan spent 13 days in the hospital before returning to the White House.
Oh, wow.
His quick recovery and humor during the ordeal, including quipping to his wife, quote, "Honey, I forgot the duck," endeared him to the public and solidified his image as a resilient leader. So John Hinckley Jr. J was found not guilty by reason of insanity and was committed to St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C. He was released from institutional psychiatric care in 2016, just 8 years ago. He's in the public. The assassination attempt.
Around now?
He's walking around now.
Crazy.
And Jason, not only is he walking around, but he wants to sing you a song.
Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing great. I'm going to do an original song of mine. But before I do that, I want to remind people to buy my album. This is my debut vinyl album, John Hinckley Redemption. And it's available now for sale. You can get it in blue vinyl or red vinyl. And go to my Twitter page at John Hinckley 20, and there's a link there where you can buy it, or you can go to asbestosrecords.com and buy it that way. But it's selling fast, so get a copy while you can. Here's another original song of mine.
I saw that line coming. I saw the rhyming scheme coming. John Hinckley Jr., Redemption, buy it on his LP. Support him, folks. Support him.
It's funny. It's red and blue albums, Republican and Democrat.
There you go.
Red. He should have done that when he was 25. I'm sure Jodie Foster would have been more impressed with his music.
Very true.
Rather than trying to kill somebody. The disconnect, Billy. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, Jay, you got the next one. We're stepping away from presidents here. We've got somebody else. Who we got here?
The attempted assassination of Pope John Paul II is one of the most dramatic and significant events in recent Vatican history. It occurred on May 13th, 1981, in St. Peter's Square, Vatican City. On that fateful day, Pope John Paul II was shot and critically wounded by Mehmet Ali Agca, a Turkish gunman. Agca fired 4 shots from a Browning high-power semi-automatic pistol, 2 of which struck the Pope. 1 in the abdomen and another in his left hand. 2 bystanders, Anne Odra and Rose Hall, were also injured by the other bullets. The Pope was immediately rushed to Gemelli Hospital in Rome, where he underwent emergency surgery that lasted several hours. Despite the severity of his injuries, he survived the attack, which he later attributed to the intervention of the Virgin Mary, as the shooting occurred on the anniversary of the first apparition of Our Lady of Fatima.
What I love here is, I love how it's the Virgin Mary stopped. Like, why did she allow the shooting to happen? Did the Virgin Mary stop Gerald Ford? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course. Can't be just the fact that the bullets didn't kill you and you were in medical, a couple doctors saved you in a medical emergency surgery.
Yeah, you were saved by the hospital. Like, that's the thing. If modern day medicine at the time didn't, whatever the procedure, if this shooting took place and he was in the wilderness, 500 miles away from the local hospital, he would have died from the injuries. It's not the Virgin Mary. It's your location to medical services. I'm sorry, guys. This is ridiculous. I don't care if you're Catholic or not, but you can't really say it's the Virgin Mary coming down. And is she doing the suturing in the hospital? It's doctors that went to school and practiced suturing in medical procedures, and the hospital being nearby. That's how he survived.
But it occurred on the anniversary of the first apparition of Our Lady of Fatima. Well, that's probably because you were making an appearance on that day.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's coincidentally lying. I'm making an appearance on the first apparition of Our Lady Fatima anniversary.
What happened to Akka, Jay?
Well, he was apprehended on the spot by Vatican security and several bystanders. He was later sentenced to life imprisonment by an Italian court. The Pope, in a remarkable act of forgiveness, visited Akka in prison in 1983 and forgave him personally.
Hey, if the Pope forgives pedophiles, why not shooters? It's good to forgive. It's a good policy. Okay, go on.
The motives behind the assassination attempt remain a subject of speculation and controversy. Akka initially claimed that he had acted alone, but later suggested various conspiracy theories, including involvement of the KGB and Bulgarian secret services. These claims have been met with skepticism, and no conclusive evidence has been found to support them.
Of course, he's like, hey, no, wait a minute. It wasn't just me. It was the Bulgarian secret services. They hired me, or the KGB. Yeah, of course he's going to do what he can to get out of this mess.
The Soviet and Bulgarian connection is this. They believe the Soviet Union orchestrated the attack due to the Pope's support for the Solidarity movement in Poland, which threatened Soviet influence in Eastern Europe. Akka was a member of the Grey Wolves, a Turkish nationalist group, which some suggest may have been involved in planning the attack. Or there's the personal vendetta. Akka had previously threatened to kill the Pope, describing him as the masked leader of the Crusades, and blaming him for various geopolitical issues.
And at the end of this, old Jay, this is why we now have the Pope Mobile. This is it. This is the reason why the Pope Mobile was created after the shooting.
So yeah, obviously it leads to increased security measures. The bulletproof Pope Mobile. Pope's act of forgiveness towards Akka was widely publicized and remains a powerful symbol of reconciliation and mercy. Was that filmed? Or I wonder what Akka's response to that forgiveness was.
It was on the 13th of May, 1981, exactly 40 years ago today, that the sound of gunshots rang out here in St. Peter's Square during the Pope's general audience, with pilgrims from around the world who travelled to Rome just to see him. The crowd looked on in disbelief as Pope St. John Paul II collapsed into the arms of his secretary, and the white vehicle that was carrying him raced to get him back into the Vatican and then to Gemelli Hospital. The Pope was struck 4 times and suffered severe blood loss. The assassination attempt almost killed the 60-year-old Pope, and thousands of people gathered outside his hospital and here at the Vatican in a vigil of prayer. And after a long and complicated surgery at the hospital, his condition stabilized and he went on to make a full recovery. The assassin who shot the Pope was Ali Akça, and after the attack, Pope St. John Paul II asked people to pray for him, and he would go on to visit him in his prison cell, saying that he forgave him. He was sentenced to life in an Italian prison, but at the request of the Pope, the Italian president pardoned him, and he was returned to Turkey, where he was imprisoned until 2010. In February of 2005, when the Pope was ill, Akça wrote to the Pope, wishing him well.
There we go. That answers your questions. Interesting. All right. Fascinating piece of history. The next one, Jay. Okay, we're not heading back to the States just yet. We have the assassination attempt of Margaret Thatcher. Wasn't she the Iron Lady? October 12th, 84, the Provisional Irish Republic Army attempted to assassinate British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and her cabinet members by bombing the Grand Hotel in Brighton, England. This event, known as the Brighton Hotel bombing, was a significant moment in the history of the Troubles, the conflict in Northern Ireland. It's referred to as the Troubles. So check out how this was done, Jay. I did not know about this one at all. The IRA's decision to target Thatcher stemmed from her hardline stance during the 81 Irish hunger strike, where she refused to grant special category status to Republican prisoners, resulting in the deaths of 10 hunger strikers. The bombing was meticulously planned over 2 years, with IRA member Patrick McGee planting a long delay time bomb in the hotel weeks before the 84 Conservative Party conference. So McGee checked into the hotel under a false name, Roy Walsh, and placed the bomb in room 629. The device was designed to detonate 24 days later, aiming to bring down a chimney stack that would slice through the hotel, targeting Thatcher's suite. So here's what happened. The bomb did indeed explode at 2:54 a.m. on October 12th, 84. The force of the blast caused significant structural damage, killing 5 people and injuring over 30 others. Notable casualties did include Conservative MP Sir Anthony Berry and several other high-ranking officials. Thatcher, who had just left her bathroom moments before the explosion, narrowly escaped unscathed. Despite the chaos and destruction, Thatcher insisted that the conference continued as planned. She addressed the delegates just hours after the bombing, receiving a standing ovation for her resilience and determination. This act of defiance was seen as a symbolic victory over terrorism. The investigation into the bombing was extensive. To check out how they found this guy McGee, because he went under the hotel with a false name. This is before closed circuit TV, right? So this,
Sure,
you can almost get away with this stuff. This is how they found the guy. Forensic teams sifted through the rubble, eventually finding a partial palm print on the hotel registration card, which led to McGee's arrest.
holy.
He was sentenced to 8 concurrent life sentences, but was released in 99. What? Yeah, he was released in 99 under the terms of the, quote, Good Friday Agreement. What do you think of that piece of history with Margaret Thatcher and the hotel bomb? A lot of destruction, eh? 30 people, 5 dead, 30 injured.
Yeah. Doesn't deserve to be released, but I'm not sure what the Good Friday
Agreement.
Be something to do with. They agreed on something which would allow him to get out early.
Probably. Well, I don't know how the IRA and the fighting works with that conflict. Yeah. I'm not too up on the conflict over there. I guess it was probably something to do with pardoning or releasing war criminals or people caught up in the fight, of just saying, hey, let's move on. Let's have a peaceful. It's probably a sign of just your peace, even if you were. To them, it wasn't a terrorist act. It was a act of war. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Jay, you got the next one.
Okay, so there have been several assassination attempts against U.S. President George W. Bush, and we're going to talk about 3.
The only attack that I was aware of was the shoe attack.
The guy throwing the shoes.
Have you seen that video?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why it makes me laugh. The way he stares at the guy that threw the shoe. Have you seen it where he's like...
Oh, yeah. I've watched it many times. It's hilarious.
Well, I guess in that culture...
I'm sure it's a sign of disrespect or something.
Yeah, I think the shoe throwing is a sign of, like, in any culture. I don't want a shoe thrown at me either. I think it's pretty disrespectful. Okay, so the guy gets arrested and pinned down, but I love how he ducks the first shoe.
He has that little smirk on his face where he's kind of like laughing at him.
So what if the guy threw a shoe at me?
Why that one always kills me. He just keeps going.
Dude, his first response was hilarious. His like kind of like he does this little head dodge and just kind of smirks. Yeah. The other dude standing beside him, he didn't really hide from it either, and he actually tried to block the second shoe, and he ducked. George ducked. The other guy tried to block it.
It's funny. That was the Yeshua attempt assassination. But what's the other one?
Yeah, well, let's talk about the real ones here. Okay, so in April 93, former President George W. Bush visited Kuwait to commemorate the victory over Iraq in the Persian Gulf War. During this visit, Kuwaiti authorities foiled a plot to assassinate him using a car bomb. 17 individuals were arrested, and the U.S. government concluded that the Iraqi intelligence service was behind the attempt. In response, President Bill Clinton ordered a cruise missile strike against an IIS building in Baghdad on June 26, 93.
This was crazy. So this bomb didn't even go off. They just said, hey, there was going to be an assassination attempt on President Bush, and I guess President Bill Clinton was in power at the time now. And he's like, you don't mess with our former president. They responded with a cruise missile strike, Jay, against an ISS building.
Yeah, so he wasn't even the president.
All three of these, he isn't the president anymore.
So that was the first one. The impact was a cruise missile strike.
That's crazy.
But what's interesting, though, Ryan, is such a slow response. That was April, and then they responded in June.
Probably investigation, because they arrested them, make sure it was. And they probably waited to strike the right building with the right people in it, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Well, let's skip ahead to 2005, Jay. Vladimir Aryatunian, a Georgian national, attempted to assassinate President Bush by throwing, listen to this, a Soviet-made RGD TAC-5 hand grenade during a public speech in Tbilisi's Liberty Square. The grenade was wrapped in a red tartan handkerchief, and it failed to detonate due to its impact being cushioned, and the handkerchief preventing the striker lever from releasing. Tuyunian was later arrested and confessed to the crime and was sentenced to life imprisonment.
Is there a video of that? I've never heard of this. Have you?
That's your question? No. I don't see any videos on this. You got the last attempt on President Bush's life, Jay? What do you got there?
Okay, so in 2022, the FBI uncovered a plot by Shahab Ahmed, an Iraqi national residing in Ohio, to assassinate George W. Bush. Shahab, who entered the U.S. in 2020 and sought asylum, allegedly planned to smuggle operatives into the U.S. from Mexico to carry out the attack. He conducted surveillance on Bush's residence in Dallas and expressed his desire to kill Bush due to his role in the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The FBI foiled the plot using informants and electronic surveillance, and Shahab was charged with aiding and abetting the attempted murder of a former federal official.
Details of this assassination plot just became public within the last few hours with the release of an affidavit following the suspect's arrest. In that court record, the FBI alleges 52-year-old Shihab Ahmed Shihab, an Iraqi national living in Ohio, wanted to kill former President George W. Bush in retaliation for the war in Iraq, which began during his presidency. According to the affidavit, Shihab told an informant that Bush, quote, was responsible for killing many Iraqis and breaking apart the entire country of Iraq. Shihab flew to Dallas this February, where the FBI says he visited the neighborhood where President George Bush lives, taking video of the front access gate and surrounding area. They say he also visited the Bush Center at SMU and took video of the library and office area there. According to the affidavit, Shihab had 4 Iraqi nationals he wanted to smuggle into the United States, who the FBI says he suggested belonged to ISIS. The FBI says he told an informant the group included 2 former Iraqi intelligence officers who would conduct several weeks of surveillance on former President Bush and determine the best way to conduct the attack and assassination. Shihab arrived in the U.S. back in 2020 on a visitor's visa and was currently awaiting review of an asylum claim. He was unaware he was under surveillance by the FBI and he was unable to carry out any of his plans. A spokesperson for former President George W. Bush said the president has all the confidence in the world in the U.S. Secret Service and our law enforcement and intelligence communities.
All right, there you go. So George W., play another round of golf, Jay. Okay, you ready? What sparked today's topic? Well, July of this year, President Trump, he too survived an attempt. Obviously, it's in the news zeitgeist or the public zeitgeist. And I was talking to Jason and said, you know what? I don't think he's the only one, obviously, that's had this attempt made on his life in recent years. We've showcased that on this episode. We're not going to talk too much about this because I think you'd have to be literally living on a rock to not know. But I do have a video here, Jay, that you might find interesting that shows a 3D reconstruction of the event. Whatever side of the fence you sit on, somebody was killed. That was the retired fire chief. And that's Yeah, it's horrible. But there are some unanswered questions about what happened that day. There's a lot that still is coming out at this time.
We basically have another JFK. There's going to be an official statement, and then there's going to be people in the public that have so much other ways of analyzing the event that will raise questions. Not more than one person was killed. I mean, one person was murdered, and it seems like a very reasonable, decent individual protecting his family. The whole thing is unnecessary and is a tragic event all around. People have questions about the complete narrative of exactly what had happened that day. If people aren't comfortable with the answers that they have been given, people will try and create an answer for themselves. We search for truth, and then we all come up to different conclusions, right or wrong. It's not it's not a negative response. It's just a human response.
We can only process in our mind with the information we have and how we understand it. It's not malicious.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. It's not a malicious.
Okay, so let's check out this video here, Jay. This is a 3D reconstruction of the Trump assassination attempt. This was given by the Associated Press just a few days ago at the time of this recording.
The assassination attempt of Donald Trump set off a panic as the bloodied former president was surrounded by Secret Service agents and hurried into his vehicle. An Associated Press analysis of more than a dozen videos and photos from the scene shows how close the shooter, 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, was able to get to the stage where the former president spoke. Here's what's known so far about the shooting on Saturday, July 13th. As rally-goers wait for Trump, a young man is seen pacing around the edges of the rally area, looking at the buildings and acting suspicious. He was in an area to the right of the stage, outside the perimeter of the rally. At around 5:20 p.m., local law enforcement photographed a man with a backpack and a rangefinder. They radioed their concerns to other officers and circulated the photo with officers outside the security perimeter. But then the man vanished from view. Trump takes the stage at 6:02 to the strains of God Bless the USA. He waves and begins his regular rally speech. Spectators were seated in front of him and behind on risers. Secret Service sniper teams can be seen positioned on two different rooftops behind the stage, looking in opposite directions. At 6:09, witnesses spot a man climbing the roof of a one-story building, about 147 yards from the stage.
Officer, people in our country that shouldn't be here. Dangerous people, criminals.
A local officer climbed to the roof to investigate, but fell after losing his grip. Trump continued his speech and turned to the right to point towards a screen displaying border-crossing numbers. At 6:11, 3 shots are fired. Secret Service agents pile atop the former president. 5 more shots are fired. About 10 seconds later, a Secret Service sniper fired back with 1 shot, hitting Crooks in the head and killing him. 3 spectators, seated in bleachers between where Crooks was positioned and where Trump was standing, were hit. Corey Comparator, a 50-year-old former firefighter, suffered a fatal shot. About 1 minute after the shooter is hit, the Secret Service say he is down. Trump is taken off stage, stopping to pump his fist and yell to the crowd.
That's a pretty straightforward, well put together video from the information that I understand it to be. Well said and put together. What do you think? I also showed you the angle for those who watch this on YouTube. It showed you the angle of the shooter. I'll say this as somebody who has shot weapons quite a few times in my military career. I have to do what's called like familiar shoots or whatever. I have to reshoot. I'm not a very good shot. So Crooks was positioned on the roof of the building approximately 400 feet, 120 meters from the stage. Now, and the angle that he was at as well, you look at that reconstruction, is interesting as well. I have fired a rifle, an assault rifle, at that range, and it's harder than you think to hit a target. I know people think, oh, it's a rifle, it's a straight line. When you're breathing, you just take an inhale, your rifle just lifts up a centimeter. It's amazing how much you'll miss the target. I'm not the best shot, but obviously if you didn't move, it didn't breathe, it just stayed like still as a stone, and you had somebody in your sights that also wasn't moving, sure. So at that range, it's close and it's far at the same time. So the fact that Crooks nicked his ear kind of indicates a little bit that he had a decent enough shot, just about got his head, but he moved.
Yeah, 0.07 degree difference.
Yeah.
A 0.07 degree difference. So you're saying somebody breathing and then Trump just barely tilting. That's all it took.
But he fired off a few shots, and I don't think any of them came close. You can see
the other ones I think were panic shots.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Yeah, so he fires the first one, which is, of course, there's no distraction. He's aiming, breathing, controlling his breath. Just about hits Trump off, or just about hits him right in the head. Trump moves at the last second. Stroke of luck. Virgin Mary, whoever. And then those other shots, he's just trying to rattle them off because he knows. And it's interesting, the sniper that shot back, I think this all took place 6:11:33 seconds. Crooks fired the first shot. Trump initially pauses his speech, then took cover behind the lectern. Secret Service agents quickly moved to protect Trump. By 6:11:49 seconds p.m., Crooks was killed by the Secret Service counterfire. Just 16 seconds later. That's incredible control. So that sniper was right away. Shots were fired. That sniper took that extra 1, 2, 3, boom, got him right in the head. One shot to the head. So it just goes to show you the difference between a trained sniper and a 20-year-old kid who.
Yeah, and that Crooks would have been moving.
Oh yeah, he was moving.
Other shots. Like, he's not just sitting still anymore.
No.
He's panic shooting. So he's moving. It doesn't appear that the two snipers that you see kind of more to Trump's right side, our left, Trump's right, those two that are on the roof, apparently those two weren't the ones that hit the kid. It was the sniper from further away.
Oh, wow.
So I think the snipers on the other two roofs may have turned around, and one of those guys took the shot. Wow. Because apparently that second shot was, if you're going by the sound analysis, which is what people are trying to use now to gauge exactly what had happened, that sound was a 400-yard shot. So it was much further away, like double the distance, apparently.
It's fascinating, not in a morbid way. It's just fascinating that, we have all this footage. That's kind of the world we're living in now, folks. When these events are happening, people are going to have cameras and cell phones everywhere. People are looking around. I hate to say it, in a good way, we're getting a lot of recreative evidence with video camera footage and cell phone footage and cameras on everybody all the time.
All the 3D mapping.
Yeah.
The re-imaging.
Yeah.
And it happened within a day. Just somebody putting the 3D masking over Trump's face and just the little tilt, and then being able to measure the degrees of which, if he didn't do that tilt, his head the back quarter of his head would have been gone.
Oh, it would have been blood right out in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
All right. Fascinating stuff. Thankfully, all those attempts did not cause a death to the target. It's unfortunate. There were on some of the stories, some innocent bystanders. It's unfortunate, of course. But Jay, for today's purpose, we're just going to talk about the failed attempts on the target. Which one do you think is the worst? Mine is Lynette Squeaky Fromm. She was one arm's length away from Gerald Ford, but she forgot to load the weapon with a proper round. And thus, when she clicked the pistol, nothing fired because there's no round was chambered. So I'm going with her as the combination of the closest to the target by far, I think, of all these people, right there, close and personal. And she failed to load the weapon. So I think that's the worst blunder as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
Okay.
I mean, clearly this, I don't know if she didn't load the gun, if somebody gave it to her and she put her up to it, or it just seems bizarre that you would have a gun that you've never shot a gun before. You don't know how
maybe
somebody just give her that gun.
Maybe she thinks guns come ready loaded. Honestly, Jay. She had a gun pulled.
I just don't know the history enough. Were there other bullets in the chamber? Maybe she had to pre-load the chamber.
Yeah, I know.
And then shoot. And there was just a gap, like an air bubble gap. And if she got off 2 shots, maybe that would have, I don't know. Like if there was something further down in the clip that had to work its way up.
Yeah.
She was obviously tackled very quickly. Yeah. So she may not have a chance to get a second shot off. But I agree. I think that's the closest you can get. But if there's no bullet in the chamber, it doesn't matter how close you're not going to pistol whip.
I was going to say, she would have been better off hitting him in the head with the pistol whip. They at least get shot in.
Or throw the gun at him.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching. Remember, in front of every silver lining, there's a cloud. And today, it was Miss Lynette Squeaky Fromm.